The documents exist, not rumors, not speculation, not fragments from anonymous sources, but thousands of pages preserved inside court archives, sworn testimony transcripts, sealed exhibits, financial records, settlement agreements, and investigative reports, quietly moving through the American legal system for years, while the public remained largely unaware of their scope. For decades, the name Jeffrey Epstein appeared only occasionally in headlines, often briefly, often without full context. Yet behind those brief mentions existed a far more complex body of documentation that continued to grow as legal proceedings unfolded. According to court documents, the first major criminal investigation involving Epstein began in the early 2000s in Palm Beach, Florida, after local police received reports involving underage girls who were allegedly recruited to provide massages at his residence. Detectives began gathering statements, interviewing witnesses, and collecting evidence that would later become part of official police reports and sworn depositions. Public records indicate that multiple individuals described a similar pattern during those early interviews. Allegations referenced in filings suggested that young girls were allegedly recruited through acquaintances, then brought to Epstein's residence, where payments were sometimes described as compensation for massages. These accounts formed the basis of the investigation, and the information gathered by Palm Beach police would eventually be forwarded to prosecutors. Do you want to know the truth behind the Epstein case? The darkest, most shocking secrets that the powerful don't want you to know? Then you need to follow this channel right now. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because what we're about to reveal will shake the very foundations of power, and you can't miss a single detail. Prepare yourself for a journey into the depths of depravity and corruption, and join us in this fight for justice. Subscribe now. But this is where the story begins to shift in ways that still raise questions today. Because what initially appeared to be a local criminal investigation gradually revealed something much larger, something that extended beyond one residence, beyond one city, and potentially beyond one network of individuals. According to publicly available records, investigators discovered that Epstein owned or controlled multiple properties across different jurisdictions, including residences in Florida, New York, New Mexico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Travel records referenced in filings also indicated frequent international flights connected to his private aircraft, an aircraft that would later become widely discussed in media coverage due to the flight logs associated with it. Flight manifests, which were later reviewed during civil litigation, documented passengers traveling between various locations over many years. Some of these passengers were staff members, others were business associates, and some were individuals whose names appeared in different parts of the case record. And this is where the documents become especially sensitive. Because the files do not simply describe events, they map relationships, movements, timelines, and communications that span decades. According to records referenced in multiple court proceedings, Epstein maintained extensive contact lists, scheduling notes and directories that included hundreds of phone numbers and addresses belonging to people from different industries and institutions. One such directory, sometimes described publicly as Epstein's Little Black Book, attracted significant attention when journalists later reported on its contents. Public reports indicated that the contact directory included names connected to business leaders, political figures, academics, and celebrities. However, legal experts repeatedly stress an important clarification whenever this document is discussed. Being listed in a contact directory does not imply wrongdoing. Individuals can appear in personal address books for many different reasons, including professional communication, social introductions, or routine networking. Still, the scale of the directory raised questions among investigators and journalists about the breadth of Epstein's social network. But the contact lists were only one part of the larger archive. According to court filings, investigators also reviewed visitor logs from several Epstein properties, including his Manhattan residence and his Palm Beach estate. These logs sometimes recorded the arrival of guests, staff members, drivers, and service personnel. In some instances, names appearing in visitor logs overlapped with names appearing in travel records or contact directories, creating patterns that later became points of discussion during civil litigation. Depositions taken under oath during lawsuits filed by alleged victims would later reference some of these patterns. During those depositions, attorneys asked detailed questions about who visited certain properties, who scheduled meetings, and who might have witnessed interactions occurring inside the residences. Some witnesses described the structure of Epstein's household operations, including assistants, drivers, and administrative staff responsible for managing schedules and coordinating travel. These operational details, preserved in transcripts, offered investigators a glimpse into how Epstein's daily life was organized. But this is where the situation becomes even more complicated. Because the Epstein files are not one single document, and they are not contained within one single investigation. Instead, they exist across multiple legal proceedings that unfolded over many years, including criminal investigations, civil lawsuits, sealed settlements, and later federal charges. Some documents became public through court releases, while others remained sealed for extended periods, sometimes due to privacy protections, ongoing investigations, or judicial orders. In several cases, portions of documents were released with significant redactions, entire paragraphs blacked out, names removed, and identifying details obscured. So these redactions were often implemented to protect individuals who were not charged with crimes, as well as to safeguard ongoing legal processes. But the presence of redactions also contributed to growing public curiosity about what information might still remain hidden within the files. And this is where the scale of the case begins to emerge. According to investigative reporting and court records, the number of individuals who interacted with Epstein over the years was extensive. Business partners, financial advisors, household staff, pilots, lawyers, assistants, and social acquaintances all appear at various points throughout the documentation. Some individuals appear briefly, others appear repeatedly, sometimes years apart. But again, legal experts emphasize a critical distinction. Mentioned in documents does not imply wrongdoing. Many individuals who appeared in flight logs or contact directories were never accused of any crime and were never charged with any offense. Still, the breadth of connections revealed by the documents added to the perception that Epstein operated within a complex social environment that intersected with powerful institutions. But perhaps the most debated aspect of the Epstein files is not simply who appears in them. It is how long the documents remained largely out of public view. For years, many filings existed inside sealed court archives, accessible only to attorneys, investigators, and judges involved in the cases. Settlement agreements resolved some civil claims quietly, often accompanied by confidentiality provisions that limited public disclosure. In other cases, documents were filed, but attracted little attention outside legal circles. This limited visibility meant that much of the documentary record surrounding Epstein's activities developed gradually, piece by piece, sometimes resurfacing years later when new litigation or investigative reporting brought older filings back into public discussion. But this is where the story becomes unsettling, because when researchers, journalists, and legal analysts began reviewing the available records more closely, they noticed something unusual. The Epstein case seemed to involve an unusually large volume of sealed filings, confidential agreements, and redacted exhibits compared with many other criminal investigations. Legal scholars later debated the reasons for this, pointing to the intersection of civil litigation, privacy law, and prosecutorial discretion as possible explanations. Others argued that the complexity of the case itself required careful handling to protect victims and avoid compromising ongoing investigations. Still, the result was the same. The Epstein files became a sprawling legal archive, partially visible, partially hidden, scattered across different courts and jurisdictions. And as more documents gradually emerged into the public record, they revealed something that investigators and journalists had suspected for years. This was not a simple case. It was a case built on layers, timelines, and connections that extended far beyond the original investigation in Palm Beach. And the deeper researchers looked into those records, the clearer it became that the Epstein files were not just about one individual's actions. They were about systems, about networks, about institutions that appeared in the margins of legal documents again and again. And this is precisely why the files continue to attract attention today. Because the most revealing parts of the archive may not be the names that appear on individual pages. The most revealing parts may be the structure of the documents themselves, the timelines they trace, the patterns they quietly reveal, and the sections that remain redacted. And this is where the documents start to feel less like isolated legal records and more like fragments of a much larger structure, a structure built slowly over years through investigations, lawsuits, and sworn testimony. As researchers and journalists continued examining the publicly available filings, one detail kept appearing again and again: the timeline of legal decisions that shaped how much information the public would eventually see. According to court records, the Palm Beach investigation eventually led to negotiations between Epstein's legal team and federal prosecutors. What followed would become one of the most debated legal agreements connected to the case. Public records indicate that in 2008, Epstein entered a plea agreement in Florida state court. The agreement allowed him to plead guilty to state charges related to solicitation of a minor. According to official sentencing records, Epstein served a period of incarceration under a work release arrangement, and after completing the sentence, he was required to register as a sex offender. At the time, the agreement resolved the criminal case that had emerged from the Palm Beach investigation. But the details of that agreement would later draw intense scrutiny. According to publicly released legal filings reviewed years later, the agreement also included provisions connected to federal prosecutors. Some legal analysts argued that the deal limited the possibility of broader federal charges related to the same investigation. Others noted that the structure of the agreement raised questions about prosecutorial discretion and jurisdiction. These debates later became the subject of additional court challenges, congressional inquiries, and investigative reporting. And this is where the files become even more complex. Because after the 2008 case concluded, the legal process did not end. Civil lawsuits continued to emerge. Alleged victims filed claims in federal court. Attorneys requested depositions from individuals who had worked for Epstein or interacted with him in professional capacities. During these proceedings, thousands of additional pages entered the court system, including sworn testimony, exhibits, and correspondence between legal teams. Some of those depositions offered glimpses into the operational structure surrounding Epstein's residences. Witnesses described staff roles, scheduling routines, and administrative procedures used to manage visitors and travel. Again, these statements represented testimony under oath during civil litigation, and the courts repeatedly emphasized that such testimony reflects the statements of witnesses, not judicial findings of guilt against individuals mentioned during questioning. But this is where the documentary trail expands. According to court filings and investigative reports, Epstein's activities intersected with multiple institutions, financial networks, legal firms, aviation records, and property holdings spread across different jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction brought its own legal framework, its own investigators, and sometimes its own sealed documents. As a result, the Epstein files were never centralized in one place. They existed across different courts, different years, and different phases of litigation. And this fragmentation created a strange situation. Maybe because while parts of the story became public, other sections remained sealed for long periods. Judges sometimes ordered redactions to protect privacy or ongoing legal processes. Entire passages in certain documents appeared as black bars across the page. Names removed, details obscured, context missing. For observers studying the records, these gaps became almost as significant as the text itself. Not because they proved anything on their own, but because they showed how much of the documentary history remained hidden from public view. And this is where the scale of the Epstein files begins to feel less like a single case and more like a legal archive still unfolding, piece by piece, year after year. Are you shocked by what we've uncovered so far? Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to come. More powerful names, more sinister schemes, more silenced victims. And if you want to be on the front lines of this investigation, you need to subscribe to this channel now. Leave your comment below and tell us what you think. Your voice is crucial in this fight. The more we unite, the stronger our call for accountability will be. So subscribe, comment, and share. The truth depends on it. And this is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. Because as more documents slowly entered the public record through civil litigation, investigative reporting, and court-ordered releases, observers began noticing something unusual about the Epstein case. It was not only the allegations referenced in filings that attracted attention. It was the scale of the documentation itself. According to publicly released records, the Epstein files spanned decades of activity, multiple jurisdictions, and numerous legal proceedings. Criminal investigations, civil lawsuits, financial records, travel logs, sworn depositions, settlement agreements, and internal correspondence all form part of a complex legal archive that continues to be examined by journalists, researchers, and legal analysts. But the most striking aspect may be how the system handled those documents over time. Some files became public quickly, others remained sealed for years. In several instances, courts later ordered portions of those sealed documents to be unsealed, revealing additional names, timelines, and institutional interactions that had previously remained hidden from public view. Even then, many sections remained heavily redacted, with names and identifying details removed. Legal scholars often point out that this process is not unusual in complex litigation. Courts regularly seal documents to protect privacy, preserve the integrity of investigations, or comply with legal agreements. But in the Epstein case, that the volume of sealed and partially released material created a long period of uncertainty about the full scope of the records. And this uncertainty fueled continued interest. Because the Epstein files are not simply about individuals mentioned within them. Mentioned in documents does not imply wrongdoing, and many people whose names appear in records were never accused of any crime. Instead, the files raise broader questions about how legal systems manage cases that intersect with wealth, its influence, and international connections. According to public records, Epstein maintained relationships across business, finance, academia, and social circles that included highly visible institutions and individuals. For investigators, mapping those connections required navigating multiple legal systems and privacy protections, a process that often slowed the release of information. And this brings the story back to the central tension surrounding the files. Not necessarily who appears in them, but how information about powerful networks moves through legal systems. Who has access to it? Who decides when it becomes public? And how transparency is balanced against privacy, legal protection, and due process. Because when people say that powerful individuals fear the Epstein files, the concern may not be about any single document. It may be about the possibility that a vast archive of records, testimonies, and timelines still exists, waiting to be fully understood. An archive that raises a quiet but persistent question. When complex legal histories involve wealth, influence, and international networks, how transparent can the system truly be? You've made it this far. You've seen how deep the rabbit hole goes, how vast the webs of complicity are. Now you have a choice. You can turn your back and pretend none of this happened, or you can join us. Subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, leave your comment, and most importantly, share this video. Because the only way to defeat the darkness is to bring it into the light. The more people see, the harder it will be for the predators to hide. Together, we can build an unstoppable movement for justice. But it starts with you, with your voice, your dedication, your click on that subscribe button. Let's make this echo in the halls of power. Let's shake the foundations of the mighty. Let's show the entire world what truth can do. But only if you join us now. Subscribe, act, and let's change history together.